What if the richest man in the world was pretending to be unconscious, just to escape everyone? But when his nurse's quiet confession breaks through the silence, everything he thought he knew about trust and life shatters forever. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel as a sign of support. At St. Joseph's Memorial Hospital in Denver, Colorado, whispers flew among the nurses about the mysterious patient in room 412. He was admitted weeks ago after reportedly collapsing at a charity gala. No identification, no family visits, just the hospital administrator and a powerful legal team who ensured his privacy was absolute. The staff only knew him as Mr. Jameson. What they didn't know was that the man in the bed wasn't in a coma at all. Miles Jameson, a 52-year-old tech entrepreneur and reclusive billionaire, had faked the condition to test the people closest to him. Over the last few years, Miles had grown deeply disillusioned, burned by betrayal from business partners and even his own brother, who was eyeing his fortune like a vulture. When he overheard that his brother had mentioned pulling the plug if Miles didn't wake up in time to sign a contract, he made a plan. With help from his loyal attorney, Miles arranged to disappear into the coma under strict supervision at a facility where no one expected to find him. No media, no friends, just the staff and his own ears, tuned to every conversation around him. He lay motionless, eyes closed, listening for greed, lies, and betrayal. But then something, or rather someone, unexpected broke through the silence. Her name was Claire, Nurse Claire Dempsey. Late 20s, compassionate, and always humming softly as she moved about the room. While the others treated Miles like a ghost, Claire treated him like a person. She fluffed his pillows, wiped his brow, and spoke to him gently. Not because she thought he could hear, but because she believed it mattered. One evening, while the sun dipped below the Rockies and the hospital halls quieted, Claire sat beside his bed longer than usual. "Hey, Mr. Jameson," she said softly. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I hope you're dreaming about something good. I hope you're not lonely in there." Miles felt something stir inside him. Her voice, tender and full of care, broke through the armor he'd worn for years. He was used to people wanting something from him, money, power, influence, but Claire asked for nothing. That night, as the monitors beeped in slow rhythm, Claire began to talk, not to the patient, but to the silence. About her sister Ellie, who needed an expensive surgery, about the long shifts and skipped meals, about the loneliness of working nights while the rest of the world slept. Miles listened, stunned. This woman who had nothing to gain from him was more genuine than anyone he'd met in years. And suddenly his plan to lie quietly until he proved how selfish the world was started to unravel. Claire Dempsey wasn't the kind of nurse who usually opened up to her patients, especially not ones in comas. But something about Mr. Jameson, the man in room 412, made her feel safe. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was that he couldn't respond, couldn't judge. Either way, the night shifts had started feeling like therapy. Miles listened from behind his closed lids. Every sigh, every pause in her voice revealed more than words alone. That night, Claire's confession came slowly. "My sister Ellie," she whispered, adjusting his IV line. "She's only 17. She used to dance ballet, dreamed of going to Juilliard. Then last year, she got diagnosed with this rare spinal condition. The surgery alone cost more than I make in 2 years." She reached for a cloth and dabbed Miles's forehead. "I've applied for every grant, every program. I'm working doubles. I even started a GoFundMe, but it's barely cracked 1,000. It's like no one cares unless it's headline worthy." Miles felt a twinge deep in his chest, part guilt, part something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Empathy. He'd once been the kind of man who believed in funding dreams. He used to donate anonymously to art schools and robotics programs, but success had chipped away at his trust until he saw almost everyone as an opportunist. But Claire didn't know who he was. To her, he was just another forgotten patient. And yet she cared anyway. "I don't mean to complain," she continued. "You probably get sick of my rambling." She chuckled quietly, rubbing her temples. "Sometimes I just feel like I'm running in place. Like no matter how hard I try, I can't save her. And I'm so damn tired of pretending to be strong. Miles swallowed hard. He hoped the machines didn't pick up the subtle movement. He was used to hearing people talk about money, but not like this. Not so raw, so hopeless. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photo. "This is Ellie," she said, sliding the picture under the bed's edge. "I bring this with me everywhere, just in case I forget what I'm fighting for." Miles longed to open his eyes, to tell her that she wasn't alone, that he had the means to make her sister's pain disappear with a phone call. But doing that would shatter the fragile truth he'd uncovered, that someone, finally, cared without knowing his worth. Later that night, Claire tucked the blanket around him and kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, Mr. Jameson," she whispered. "I'll be back tomorrow." And just like that, Miles realized he wasn't just eavesdropping anymore. He was invested. The next morning, Miles Jameson lay in bed, pretending to be asleep as usual, but his mind was racing. Claire's confession haunted him. Not just her words, but her voice, the heaviness in it, the bravery of saying things she clearly didn't say to anyone else. For the first time in weeks, Miles didn't feel like he was playing a game. But old habits die hard. Miles had built his fortune by staying 10 steps ahead, analyzing people, testing loyalty. And while Claire's kindness seemed genuine, a part of him needed proof. Needed to know if this wasn't just another act for sympathy or a hospital promotion. So he decided to nudge the game forward, just a little. That afternoon, Claire returned to room 412, her hair pulled into a loose bun, tired eyes brightened by caffeine and a warm smile. She greeted him the same way she always did. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jameson. I'm back. Not sure if you missed me, but I missed you." She began her usual routine, checking his vitals, adjusting wires, talking to him softly like he was a dear friend. Miles decided to make his move. Very subtly, he twitched a finger. Claire stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes flicked to his hand. "Did you?" She leaned in closer. "Mr. Jameson?" He stayed still, completely still. She frowned, watching his face. "I swear your hand moved." She went to alert the head nurse, but then paused. "Maybe I imagined it," she muttered, rubbing her eyes. "I've been so tired." Miles almost felt bad, but the hesitation confirmed something important. Claire didn't jump to conclusions or exploit what she thought she saw. She didn't call the press or make a scene. She quietly returned to her post, treating him with the same gentle care as always. Later, during her dinner break, she brought in a peanut butter sandwich and sat in the chair by his bed. "This is all I had time to grab," she told him, unwrapping it. "If you ever wake up, I promise I'll bring you something better. You look like a steak guy." Miles almost smiled. She chewed slowly, staring out the window. "I know this sounds crazy, but talking to you helps. Everyone else in my life expects me to have it together all the time. But you just... listen." Then came the second test. He twitched his finger again, more clearly this time. Claire's sandwich dropped to the floor. She rushed to his side, eyes wide. "Mr. Jameson, can you hear me?" Her voice was breathless, filled with hope, not panic. He didn't move. "Please," she whispered, "if you can hear me, you're not alone." For the first time in a long time, Miles believed it. This wasn't a game anymore. This was something real. 2 days passed since Claire had seen Miles's finger twitch. She hadn't told anyone. Not the charge nurse, not the neurologist. Some part of her feared she'd imagined it, but deeper still, she felt a strange connection to the man in room 412. Something told her that if he was in there, if he was aware, he trusted her. Miles, meanwhile, wrestled with guilt. He'd always prided himself on staying emotionally detached. It's how he built his empire. But Claire had gotten through. He wanted to help her more than anything. But to do so, he'd have to expose himself, reveal the truth, and admit he'd been pretending all along. Lying about a coma was unethical, possibly even criminal. But if coming clean could change Claire's life, maybe it was time to let go of control and face the fallout. That evening, as the hospital settled into its nighttime hush, Claire entered the room carrying a book. "You probably won't care," she said lightly, "but I brought To Kill a Mockingbird. Figured you'd appreciate the classics." She sat beside him and began to read aloud. Her voice was smooth and calming. every word laced with emotion. Miles listened, not just to the story but to her, to the passion she poured into every sentence, the weight of her exhaustion, the quiet resilience behind every breath. Halfway through the first chapter, she paused. "I'm sorry if this is silly," she said, her voice trembling, "but I need to believe you're in there. I need someone to hear me." Miles couldn't stay silent any longer. Very slowly, deliberately, he turned his head toward her. Claire gasped and dropped the book. Her eyes locked onto his. "Mr. Jameson." His eyelids fluttered. His lips parted slightly. She reached for the call button but stopped herself. "Can you hear me? Blink if you can." He blinked. Claire's hands flew to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh my God, but you are in there!" He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His voice rasped out like gravel. "Claire!" Her knees buckled and she sank into the chair. You said my name." Miles nodded slowly, painfully. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she laughed in disbelief. "I knew it. I knew I wasn't crazy." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Claire shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. You gave me more than you know." Miles frowned. "I need to tell you something. About me. About all of this." She took his hand. "You don't have to explain right now. Just rest. You're awake, and that's all that matters." But Miles knew that the real story was just beginning. Tomorrow the world would find out who he really was, and why he'd stayed silent for so long. The next morning, the hospital was in chaos. By 7 a.m., word had spread through the halls like wildfire. The man in room 412 had woken up. Nurses, doctors, and administrators rushed to confirm it. Miles Jameson, the mystery patient, was conscious and speaking. But even as medical staff flooded his room with questions, he had only one request. "Please bring me Nurse Claire Dempsey." Claire had barely clocked in when she was summoned. She hesitated outside the door, her heart pounding. Everything had changed overnight. When she entered, Miles sat upright, sipping water slowly. His face was pale but alert, and when he saw her, a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You kept your promise," he said. Claire smiled back. "And you broke your silence." The room emptied as doctors gave them privacy, but not before exchanging suspicious glances. Miles knew the questions were coming. Why had he been unresponsive for so long? What changed? He motioned to the chair beside him. "There's something you need to know, and after I tell you, you might hate me." Claire sat, folding her hands nervously. "Go on." "I wasn't in a coma," he began, voice low. "Not really, I was pretending." She froze. "What?" "I had my reasons," he continued. "I've spent years surrounded by people who only wanted my money or my name. Even my own brother tried to manipulate my medical care for a business deal. I needed to disappear, so I worked with my attorney to fake a medical condition and hide out where no one would expect me. Somewhere quiet, somewhere anonymous." Claire stared at him, stunned. "So, you used this hospital like a hiding place?" "Yes, I was going to lie low, listen, and eventually disappear again." She stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "And all this time, you heard everything?" He nodded. "Every word." A wave of embarrassment and anger washed over her. "I told you things I've never told anyone. I sat here and trusted you." Miles reached for her hand. "And you were the only one who treated me like a human being. You didn't know who I was. You didn't stand to gain anything. But you gave me hope. You reminded me what compassion looks like." Claire pulled her hand back, pacing now. "You lied to an entire hospital. You risked people's jobs, their reputations, mine included." "I know," he said, voice thick with regret, "and I'll take full responsibility for that. But before you walk away, please hear me out." She stopped, arms crossed, waiting. "I want to help you. Your sister, your family. You gave me a reason to stop hiding. Let me give something back." Claire hesitated. Part of her wanted to storm out, but another part, the one that remembered his weak, rasping voice whispering her name, stayed rooted to the floor. "I don't need charity," she said quietly. "It's not charity," Miles replied. "It's gratitude." and for the first time, Claire didn't know how to respond. Claire walked out of room 412 with her heart racing and her thoughts spinning. The man she'd cared for, confided in, and cried beside wasn't just a patient. He was Miles Jamison, billionaire tech mogul and media recluse. And more than that, he'd pretended to be in a coma. By the time her break came, whispers had turned into full-blown gossip. Everyone wanted to know how she, the night nurse, had known he was waking up. Some even hinted she was part of a scheme. Claire stayed quiet, unsure of what to say. Her entire world had been turned upside down. Miles, meanwhile, sat in bed with a notebook, his mind clearer than it had been in years. For the first time in a decade, he felt the urge to act not out of strategy, but from the heart. That evening, when Claire returned to check his vitals, he looked up and said, "I made arrangements today." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were cautious now. "Claire," he said gently, "I wired money to the clinic your sister needs to go to. They've confirmed the full procedure and post-surgery care is now covered." She blinked, stunned. "You what?" "I also contacted a lawyer to set up a medical scholarship fund in your name. You've inspired me to make things right, not just for you, but for others like you, people who give everything and ask for nothing." Claire stepped back, shaking her head. "Miles, this is too much. You don't even know me." "But I do," he said, sitting upright. "I know more about you than I do most of the people in my inner circle. You showed me grace when I deserved none. You spoke to me like a human being when everyone else treated me like a ghost." She hesitated, tears forming in her eyes again, but not from sadness this time. "Why me?" she asked. "Why not just leave quietly and keep pretending no one matters?" Miles gave a tired smile. "Because you reminded me what it means to matter to someone." Silence filled the room. Finally, Claire exhaled. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. Part of me is still angry, but another part is grateful. You could have stayed quiet forever." "I almost did," he admitted, "but then you sat beside me and told me about Ellie, and I realized hiding from the world doesn't protect you from the truth. It just delays it." She nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. "I'll respect whatever decision you make," Miles added. "If you want nothing to do with me after this, I understand." Claire stared at him, then down at her hands. She hadn't expected any of this. Not the confession, not the generosity, not the strange connection she still felt toward him. "I don't have an answer yet," she said softly, "but I'll be back tomorrow." That small promise was more than he'd hoped for. And for the first time in years, Miles Jamison felt something that no amount of money had ever given him. Hope. A week later, room 412 was no longer the quiet refuge it had once been. Nurses came and went with excited whispers. Doctors made frequent visits to monitor Miles Jamison's recovery. The media had caught wind of his return to the public eye, though no one yet knew the full story, except Claire. She stood at the nurse's station reviewing charts, trying to focus on her shift. But her thoughts kept drifting to the man who had turned her world upside down. Since his confession, they'd spoken every day. Sometimes about Ellie, sometimes about his past, and sometimes about nothing at all. The truth was, Claire didn't know how to label what was happening between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But it wasn't just professional anymore either. It was something deeper, built on trust and scars. When she finally stepped into room 412 that morning, Miles was sitting upright, dressed in real clothes for the first time. Jeans, a navy sweater, and sneakers. A far cry from the hospital gown and wires he'd worn the last few weeks. "You look almost human," she teased. "Don't let the sneakers fool you. I'm still a billionaire with terrible fashion sense." Claire chuckled, but her smile faded as she noticed the duffel bag by his side. "You're leaving?" Miles nodded. "Discharge this afternoon. I have meetings to deal with and apologies to make." Claire looked down, her throat tightening. "So, this is goodbye?" "Only if you want it to be." He stood slowly, still stiff but stronger now. "I don't expect you to forgive me for how this all started, but I hope you'll remember how it ended." She met his eyes. "Ellie's surgery is scheduled for next month. You saved her life." "No," he said softly. "You did. I just had the resources." She stepped closer. "So what now? You go back to your world, I stay in mine?" Miles smiled. Not exactly. I've decided to stay in Austin for a while. Open a foundation here. Something local. Something real. I want you to help run it. Claire's eyes widened. Me? I'm a nurse. You're more than that. You're someone who understands people. And I can't think of anyone I'd trust more. For a moment, she said nothing, just looked at him, heart pounding with a mix of fear, wonder, and the tug of something new. Then she nodded. Okay, let's try. He reached out and gently took her hand. Together? Claire squeezed it back. Together. As they walked out of room 412, side by side, the hospital doors opened to a city buzzing with life. A man who'd once faked silence had found his voice again, and a woman who had once whispered into the void had been heard, loud and clear. It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Miles Jamison faked a coma to escape the chaos of his life, but found something far more valuable than solitude. Through Claire's compassion and honesty, he rediscovered purpose, humanity, and the strength to face the world again. What began as deception ended in redemption, proving that sometimes the people we least expect can change our lives forever. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story of second chances and unexpected connections, be sure to follow for more inspiring tales. Like, share, and comment your thoughts. Who would you trust with your truth?